If you have ever thought about starting your own podcast, you should check out Riverside. Riverside is an online recording studio that lets you record podcasts and video in studio quality from anywhere. And if you click on the affiliated link in the episode description and you buy a subscription, you will also be supporting the podcast. And if you're going to start your own podcast or you just want to continue to listen to great podcasts, you need headphones or speakers. If you click on the Amazon affiliated link, you can get great deals on headphones and speakers. And if you make a purchase, it will also help support the podcast. Both links will be in the episode description if you are interested. In 17th century France, people were enthralled with magic and poison. But there was a problem. France was a Catholic country. So the magic underworld of France was a secret. But the thing with secrets is, sometimes they come out. And the story I have for you today tells the tale of how France's secret magic underworld came to the surface. Hi, my name is Courtney Jewell, and you are listening to the 13th episode of the second season of History Shelf, a podcast about history that proves that sometimes fact is even more interesting than fiction. For the second season of History Shelf, I have chosen to title this season Something Wicked This Way Comes. You may know that comes from the William Shakespeare play Macbeth. I am going to be talking each week this season about someone from history that was accused of witchcraft. But as we go along, you will find that the wicked I am referring to are not the ones that were accused, but rather the accusers. You will find that those accused were not obviously actually witches, but victims of people that were out for revenge and personal gain, and those caught up in the hysteria of it all. And for this week, I am talking about Catherine Monvoisin. Catherine was born around 1640. She was born Catherine Gier, but she is most commonly known as Monvoisin. This episode takes place in France, and my French is absolutely terrible. My old French professor can confirm that. I am going to try my best to pronounce these names correctly, but please just bear with me and know I really am trying my best. Catherine was probably born in Paris, France, or at the very least, that is where she spent most of her life. She grew up poor and was married at the age of 20 to a man named Antoine Monvoisin. Together, Catherine and Antoine had several children, but her oldest daughter, Marie Marguerite, is the only one whose name is known. Antoine was a jeweler and a silk merchant, and he had a shop in Paris, but he was shitty at running his business, and it went bankrupt. He was also a really shitty husband, and he was abusive to Catherine. Catherine had multiple lovers. We know of at least 6. Her lovers were an executioner named André Guillaume, Monsieur Latour, Viscount of Cousins, the Count of La Bouteille, the alchemist Blessy, the architect Boucher, and the magician Adam Lesage. Catherine also tried to kill her husband multiple times. This was a well-known fact. One of her lovers would even greet her with asking her if she had killed her husband yet. Her husband also said that he wanted an autopsy after he died. Because her husband had a failed business, Catherine had to provide for her family. To do that, she was a palm reader and face reader. She was taught fortune-telling when she was 9 years old. Catherine was also a midwife, and she apparently provided women with abortions, or at the very least, she told them where they could get an abortion. Abortion at this time was a capital offense in France for both the woman getting an abortion and the provider. She also would sell spells, charms, amulets, potions, and even poisons. Magic was really popular in 17th century France, as was poisoning people. She would also sell cosmetics. Some of these cosmetics would whiten skin and get rid of gray hair. She had tonics that would cure ailments. Some of the potions that she sold were love potions. She sold spells to soldiers to keep them safe. She also sold spells that would improve people's gambling. She sold spells that would give people rich spouses or make their spouses kinder. She also sold magical powders like dried up pigeon hearts, toad bones, mole teeth, Spanish flies, iron fillings, and even human remains. She sold a magical coin that would somehow end up back in the owner's pocket after they spent it. She would also sell calls. Some newborns are born with a membrane that covers their face and head. Those membranes are called calls, and they were considered to be lucky. Many clients, mostly women, came to Catherine's shack in her garden for her help. Catherine was so successful that she was able to support a family of 6, including her mother and her lover, a magician named Adam Lesage. If Catherine's amulets, charms, spells, or potions didn't work for a client, then, if they had the money, Catherine would arrange a sacrilegious ceremony. These ceremonies were performed by priests. These priests were rogue Catholic priests that had mistresses, loved children, and they would bless Catherine's calls and potions and perform black masses. During a black mass, a woman would lie naked. She would be the altar, and she would hold candles made from the fat of a hanged man. The priest would then summon a demon to do the woman's bidding by sacrificing a baby. At the end of some of these black masses, the priest would have sex with the woman. This was done when a woman wanted to have a man fall in love with her or have a man fall back in love with her. It is possible that babies were sacrificed at these black masses. Some priests did admit to doing this, but it's hard to determine if they were telling the truth or not. I have already covered this season that people have confessed to crimes despite the fact that they were innocent. Catherine knew abortionists and she was a midwife, so it's possible that a fetus or a stillborn was used. Catherine loved to drink. She was a known alcoholic, and one time when she got drunk, she said that she had burned the bodies of 2,500 babies in her furnace. It's unknown if this was actually true. In either 1665 or 1666, Catherine was questioned about her fortune-telling and providing spells and potions and things like that. She told authorities that what she was doing was not wrong because her gifts were given to her by God. Because of this, Catholic authorities let her go. She may have been let go because she had made friends with a lot of important people. In fact, a lot of important people were her clients, though she also had clients from the lower class as well. Some of her upper class clients included, and please bear with me, I'm about to say a lot of French names, so please be patient. Her famous clients included Olympia Mancini, the Countess of Soissons, Marie Anne Mancini, Duchess of Bouillon, Francois Henri de Montmorency, Duke of Luxembourg, and Antonice de Montespan. Remember that last one because she is going to be a key player a little later on in this story. Another reason why Catherine was let go was because she could have possibly been blackmailing some priests. So, what was Catherine's downfall? The beginning of the end for Catherine started in 1675 with the trial of Madame de Benvilliers. She and her lover, Army Captain Gordon de Saint-Croix, poisoned her father in 1666, and then they poisoned her two brothers, Antoine Dubray and Francois Dubray, in 1670 so she could inherit their estates. There is also a possibility that she visited hospitals to poison poor people. She was eventually caught, put on trial, and executed. This caused many people to question the mysterious deaths that had been happening, and they even started to wonder if they were being poisoned. One of the people that wondered this was King Louis XIV, so he started an investigation. This led to the arrest of Marie Bosse. Marie got drunk at the party of Marie Vigoureux, and she talked about how she sold deadly potions to the aristocracy. A lawyer at the party named Met Perrin reported her words to the police. So the police sent a wife of a police officer to buy a potion from Marie so the wife could kill her husband. Marie sold her the potion. Marie was arrested. Through the confession of Marie Bosse and the confessions of Marie Bosse's family members and the confession of Marie Vigoureux, the police learned about the network of fortune tellers in Paris. Marie Bosse and Catherine were enemies, and Marie was the one that led the police to Catherine. Now I need to tell you more about Antoinette de Montespan. Antoinette's full name was Françoise Antoinette de Rochechouart, Marquise de Montespan, and she was the mistress of King Louis XIV. Louis was married to Maria Theresa of Spain, but she didn't really care about being queen, and so Louis's main mistress, like most kings, he had more than one mistress. His main mistress acted more like his queen. So a lot of power came with being his main mistress. And for a while, that role was filled by Antoinette. Antoinette was charming and beautiful and well educated. Together, Antoinette and Louis had 7 children, 3 of which Louis legitimized. As I mentioned before, Louis had many mistresses, but the main one had the power, and Antoinette was Louis's main mistress. But Louis had a wondering heart. The first time this happened, Antoinette was able to bring Louis's attention back to her. But in 1673, his attention was on another. Antoinette turned to Catherine to arrange a series of black masses. This wasn't the first time Antoinette had used Catherine's services. She first had Catherine arrange a black mass in 1667 to get Louis to fall in love with her. After the black mass, she became Louis's official mistress. After the series of black masses, the woman Louis was interested in died before she became his mistress. Antoinette was the human altar in at least one of these black masses. Catherine also provided Antoinette with an aphrodisiac. It is possible that Catherine could have poisoned the woman that Louis was interested in. This is known as the Affair of the Poisons. On March 5th, 1679, Catherine tried to deliver the petition, but there were too many petitioners and Louis didn't take the petition. Catherine then gave the petition to her daughter Marie Marguerite to burn. The next day, Catherine made plans to visit Catherine Trianon to plan a second assassination attempt. But they would never get a second chance to kill Louis because Catherine was arrested on March 12, 1679 after Mass. She was on her way to meet Catherine Trianon to plan a second assassination attempt. When Catherine was arrested, her maid Margot said that the arrest would mean the end of a lot of people, meaning a lot of people were involved in the secret magic underworld. Along with Catherine, the rest of Catherine's network was arrested. Catherine could have been tortured, but she wasn't because it was feared that she would say that members of high society were involved in the secret magic underworld. But her interrogators did know that Catherine was an alcoholic and that she was a chatty Cathy when she got drunk, so they kept supplying her with alcohol. At first, she said that anyone that wanted poisons, she just sent them Marie Boss's way. But then she did name Marguerite LaFerrin and Francois de Dreux as clients of hers. On October 10th, 1679, she said that she sold poisons and magical services to several members of the French royal court. During this time, many people were arrested and everyone was throwing everyone under the bus. One of Catherine's ex-lovers was arrested and told police that Catherine had 2,500 babies buried in her garden. Catherine denied providing abortions. She denied that she burned the bodies of infants, and she denied that she had the bodies of infants buried in her garden. She denied killing babies and arranging black masses, and she denied working for and even meeting Antoinette. She denied using poisons, and she said she only had purgatives for personal use or for her family's use. Though it is reported that she told the guards she feared that she would be asked about her visits to court. Catherine's trial began on February 17, 1680. She was found guilty of witchcraft. She was sentenced to be burned at the stake. Before she was executed, it is documented that Catherine was tortured. She was tortured so badly that she begged for mercy. Though the Lieutenant General of Police, Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie, said that Catherine was never tortured even though they had the permit to do so. A French aristocrat, Marie de Rabutin Chantal, Marquise de Sévigné, visited Catherine shortly before Catherine was executed, and she said that it did not appear that Catherine had been tortured. Whether or not Catherine was tortured after her verdict was handed down is uncertain, but what is for certain is that she did not give the police any new information during those interrogations. Catherine was executed on February 22, 1680 in public on the Place de Grève in Paris, France. She was taken to her execution in a cart. When they got to the place of execution, she refused to get out of the cart and she had to be dragged out. As she was dragged out, she swore at the people dragging her and she pushed away the priests. On this podcast, we have seen different reactions to being executed. On one end of the spectrum, we have the Anne Boleyn and the George Boleyns that walked calmly to their death. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have this reaction. The Britas et Pels of history. I think my reaction would be more of the latter reaction than the former. But anyways, back to Catherine. She was chained to the stake, and as the straw was put around her, she kept kicking it away. A month before Catherine's execution, Catherine's daughter Marie Marguerite was questioned, but she didn't say anything. She didn't say anything until her mother was executed. In July of 1680, Marie Marguerite confessed to the police all her mother was doing. She said that Antoinette had contacted her mother. She said that they had been planning to kill the king. Marie Marguerite said that she was helping her mother because Catherine had forced her to. Marie Marguerite said that Catherine said that if she didn't help her, then Catherine would poison her. After this, Louis stopped the investigation because it made him look bad that his main mistress was involved. In 1691, Antoinette was no longer in royal favor and she went to live in a convent. When she died on May 27, 1707, Louis did not allow his children to wear mourning clothes for her. The affair of the poisons resulted in 442 suspects, 367 arrest orders issued, 218 arrest orders carried out, 36 executions, and 23 people sent to live in exile. Catherine has been depicted lots of times in media. Vivian Romance played her in the film of The Case of the Poisons. Anna Min played her in the film Marquise. Susan Clemont's character, Madame Aguette, in the TV show Versailles is based off of Catherine. The manga Monvoisin is partially based on Catherine. Many books have been written about Catherine. W. Branch Johnson wrote The Age of Arsenic. Brad Steger wrote The Hypnotist. Judith Merkel Riley wrote The Oracle Glass. Anne N. Siege Golan wrote Angelique N. de Koning. Shelby Magarin wrote Serpent and Dove. Danielle L. Jensen wrote Hidden Huntress. Addie Thornley wrote An Affair of Poisons. And Lana Popovic wrote Poison Priestess. The black metal band Enthroned wrote a song about Catherine for their album Carnage in Worlds Beyond, titled Graced by Evil Blood. And that was the life of Catherine Monvoisin. Thank you so much for listening to the 13th episode of the second season of History Shelf. There are 15 episodes planned for this season. Next week's episode is going to be about Giles Corey. I hope you come back for that. A few things before we go. If you want to follow this podcast on social media, the Twitter is at HistoryShelfPod. The Instagram is at History_Shelf_pod. The Facebook page is History Shelf Podcast. And the TikTok is History Shelf. If you want to help support this podcast financially, there are a few ways you can do that. One is you can buy merch from the History Shelf merch store. I will leave a link to the History Shelf merch store in the episode description. You can also become a Patreon. This podcast is always going to be free, but there are some perks that come along with becoming a Patreon. The first tier is called History Student, and that is $1 a month, and with that I will send out a thank you to you on social media. The second tier is called History Fan, and that is $3 a month, and with that you get the first tier, plus you get to vote in a poll that helps me choose the theme for the next season of this podcast. The third tier is called History Buff, and that is $20 a month, and with that you get the first two tiers, plus you get a handwritten note of thanks mailed to you from me. And the last tier is called History Lover, and that is $40 a month, and with that you get the first three tiers, plus you get to choose one item from the History Shelf merch store. I will leave a link to the Patreon in the episode description in case you are interested. You can also support this podcast by clicking on one of the affiliated links. There's one for Riverside and there's one for Amazon. If you buy anything from either one of those links, that will help support the podcast. Also, if you want to advertise something on this podcast, so if you have a podcast or a book or a YouTube channel or something like that, and you want to advertise it on this podcast, you can buy ad space. I have a gig on Fiverr. I will leave a link to that gig in the episode description. If you want to support the podcast, but you don't want any of the merch, and you don't want any of the perks, and you don't want to buy anything, I have turned on listener support on Spotify for podcasters. But as always, the best way that you can support this podcast is to continue to listen to it. And there are a few other ways that you can help out this podcast for free. One is if you are listening on a platform that lets you rate this podcast 5 stars and or leave a positive review. If you do that, that would be very helpful. Also, sharing this podcast on social media and telling your family and friends that you found a podcast that you think that they will enjoy would be very helpful. Alright, well, until next time, keep learning, keep loving history, and come back for next week's episode. Bye.